Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar on Google Workspace updates for nonprofits. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'll be the moderator today.
I'm Steve Longenecker. I'm the Director of IT Consulting at Community IT.
My name is Luke Casey. I'm an IT business manager over at Community IT.
So we're going to move on to talk about some of the headaches. So ways to avoid headaches as we grow. So first question I'll throw out there is, should I discourage use of Outlook? So we talked a little bit earlier about managing a hybrid environment with some people on Google Workspace, some people on Outlook. What would you guys respond to that?
Yes, let's keep that one short. Yes, I would discourage it. They've made the integration with Outlook better and better, but like you're just missing the opportunity if you're using Outlook. And now, look, if you have particularly an executive who insists on using Outlook, what are you going to do? And it does work better than it ever did. In the old days, could be a real headache, as in a never-ending headache. But in general, I would just say, hey, look, you're using Google, use the browser. That's what it's designed for. That's where you get the better search. And everything's better if you're using it in the browser. So yes, do discourage the use of Outlook.
I would agree. I think we talked in the previous webinar about there are some things that are like some people you're going to need to use Excel for certain things because Sheets just doesn't do what Excel
Absolutely.
do.
Yes.
But there, if you're using a tool, then you have, good integration with the rest of the Google suite. I think that integration is getting better and better. So with very small exceptions, but definitely for Outlook and for as much as you can get your organization committed to a platform, everyone using it makes it a lot easier for everyone.
And just to clarify, Norma asked Outlook as an email. Yes, we have customers who love Outlook, like they might have come from a different organization. They've moved to a new one. The new one's using Gmail. They don't like Gmail. They want to use Outlook still. And so they want to actually turn on Outlook, that email client that's designed to work with Microsoft Exchange, and they want to use it with Gmail. And it can be done, but it's just not a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is to avoid headaches is, what are Google shared drives and how do I use them?
Can I steal this one too, Luke? And then you got the next two?
Feel free.
All right. So Google shared drives, and I got to be brief, so it used to be that everybody had just Google Drive, and that was all there was. And they would store their documents, their Google Docs and their Word documents in their Google Drive, and not just docs, it could be spreadsheets as well. And then they would maybe have folders in there, and then they might share either an individual document or an individual spreadsheet or a folder with other people. And the way you would create collaboration within an organization is that you would maybe one person, maybe the head of finance would create a folder, and then they share it with the rest of their finance team, and everybody would work out of that folder. That is not what Google would recommend you do now. They would recommend that you switch to Google shared drives, which are different animals. Those are created not as part of my Google Drive, but rather they are the organization's shared drive. So then we would create one. I can still, as an end user, by default, create that. So if I'm the finance person, I can create a finance shared drive, but it's not in my Google Drive. It's not owned by me. It's owned by the organization. And anybody that's a member of that shared drive can put their files into it. That is the new way to recommend that's what you do. It's almost a whole 15-minute spiel about that. There are some blog posts on the Community IT website. If you go to the blog and look in the resources and do a search for Google shared drives, you'll get a bunch of blog posts on them. The biggest thing is the ownership. Google treats ownership of files very, very, it's very important. And so if if you put something into a Google shared drive, it is part of that, it is owned by that shared drive, and therefore it is owned by the organization. If you share a folder from your Google Drive, from your drive, not from a shared drive, but from your drive with me, and I'm not in your organization, and I put some files into it, those files are still owned by me, even though I put them into your folder. And that ownership can have long-term repercussions. And so it's an important thing. And so if you're starting now, or even if you're not starting now, if you're already there, but you're thinking, okay, how do we move forward? Create some empty shared drives and start using those to try to use those more in the future.
I think it speaks to just governance around using OneDrive, My Drive, SharePoint, shared drives. So we did a different webinar on file migration. And in that webinar, they talked a little bit about governance. So getting everybody on the same page when they're using those resources. Okay, so next question was, how do I offboard users and why is that important in Google Workspace? Luke, you were going to take that one.
Sure thing. So offboarding users is particularly important in Google because all of your pricing is user-based. So if you have 20 or 30 former employees who you have their data you want to keep a hold of, a lot of people will just kind of leave that in place and keep paying for those user licenses. And there are much better ways to do it. There's ways to archive that data, to put it in a shared format, turn them into an equivalent to a shared mailbox, to put their data up into a drive. But really, one, it's a security risk because you're leaving an unmonitored mailbox that someone could get the credentials to and log in and get your data. And the other is you're paying money for something that you're not using. And both of those are things we like to discourage.
Exactly. And it also, again, around governance, like getting in the habit of the people who have accounts and logins should be people who work for your organization, and you need to keep an inventory of that. Google, when you first set it up, like you said, it doesn't make you have to do that, but if you get in that habit early, it will help you later as you go on. And then the last question on this slide, what are third-party backups and what is third-party mail filtering, and how are those both important for Google Workspace?
Sure. So third-party backups are just like you might have a service that backs up your hard drive data. This is a service that would back up the data in your Google Drives. This is particularly important for any kind of data corruption or account hijacking, accidental deletions, whatever you might have, whether it's a hostile act or an accidental event. It's always good to back up your data. There's the old saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none. If all of your data lives in one place and that place has a problem, Google has a massive cybersecurity event, a server farm gets hit by a tornado, and it's just not accessible for a couple of days, you want to have that data backed up somewhere else. If it's something like you have a ransomware event and you just need to write off a whole document, boom, you've got a backup. You can take care of yourself. And as far as third-party mail filtering, I don't know how many of you are bakers, but it's a lot like sifting your flour. The product itself is still going to get to you, but you're going to clear it out of all those clumps. You're going to take care of a lot of the things that are going to come in that might otherwise get through Google's web filtering, because Google's end goal is to get engagement and get you to use their product. And if their filters are too stringent and you're not getting any email, you're not going to use their product to communicate with the outside world. So they have to hit that balance between ease of use and filtering out suspicious or malicious activity. A third-party filter is someone who comes in purely with the objective of filtering out that bad activity. And generally, having the two on top of each other leads to a much more secure environment.
And that is, again, something that will become more and more important. The more users you have, the more complex your office organization is. So again, something that you might not have to be doing when you're a 2, 3, 4 person organization, but as you grow, you're going to want to have more of those protections in place. All right, so we have some more ways to avoid headaches. So we talked a little bit about some governance earlier, but what are governance best practices and what policies do I need? And I feel like actually I put this question in here, but this could be an entire webinar on its own. So can you give us just maybe a couple of documents that you really need to have that maybe you don't know that you need to have for Google Workspace, because it's so easy to set up?
everybody should have, there should be just general policies that apply to all of IT that don't necessarily apply to Google, but Google's part of it, right? Like an acceptable use policy. I think data retention policies have a lot of impact on how you use Google. So how long do you keep data around? When do you get rid of data? I think data is often viewed only as an asset and never as a liability, but in fact, it's both. And there are times that you probably want to get rid of data. So that would impact Google. Google has tools then that can help you implement those policies. But like, for example, we have a client that recently asked us to automatically delete emails after 90 days. They just wanted those emails to be gone. And there is a Google, you can technically implement that in Google Workspace, but you need the policy first. That's a decision that you need to make as an organization. Why are we doing this? Why don't we want to have emails that are older than 90 days around? Those are decided by human beings, and then the implementation, and not by the IT department generally. And then the implementation is by the IT folks once the policy is decided. We sometimes discuss with our clients, this is again now specific to Google, do you want to have policies and governance around the creation of these like shared drives that we mentioned or Google Groups that we're about to talk about? Do you want to allow, by default, Google allows anyone to create those in your workspace. So that can lead to a lot of sprawl. You might have tons and tons of shared drives if everyone can create them whenever they want to. So you might want to have some governance and just limit that and say, there needs to be a process before a new shared drive gets created. So that can be helpful. Another one that's a gotcha that we see with immature Google Workspace implementations is too many super admins. That's a very powerful role. And it's not something that you want to have just everyone with that power. Even if they're trusted people, it's just something that you don't want to do. So there's ways to limit that. Google has lots of opportunities to give granular administrative control, not the super admin, which is the super everything power. So those are just some things picking out. There's other stuff, but policies that, again, some of them you technically implement, and some of them aren't even technical implementations. They're just decisions that you've made as an organization and that you ask everyone to adhere to. And it becomes like a performance. You're expected to dress it a certain way. It's not that if you try to enter the building with the wrong dress code, some automatic system comes down and throws you into a vat of oil. That's not what happens. It's just that there's a policy and you follow it. And that same thing can apply to IT systems where there's not a technical thing happening, but it's still something that's expected of everyone, and everyone knows it and signs off on it as part of their employment with you.
And if you're struggling with governance and policy creation, we are planning to do a webinar on that early next year. So stay tuned for that as well. What are Google Groups and what are the headaches with that? Quickly.
You better go, Luke.
Sure thing. So Google Groups are kind of their analog to a shared mailbox. They're a way for a communal group of people to work out of one mailbox that comes in. Everyone has access to it. Everyone can send from it, but there's also kind of a built-in section adjacent to it that's much more kind of collaborative. There are communal chat spaces. It's almost like a meeting point between a Slack channel and a shared mailbox. It's an interesting workspace. It works well. Some people have difficulties adopting it in the very beginning just because it's very different from what they're used to. But I think once they're used to working in it, it's a great space.
So just to close it up, if you're new to Google and you're just starting out, don't have info as a user in Google, because that means that for it to be secure, you need to have, we'll talk about 2SV very soon, but you need to have multi-factor authentication on that. And so that means it's hard to share. So don't have info be a user account, make info be a Google group, and then allow the 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 people that are responsible for monitoring that address be members of that group. There's tons of granular controls. You can have the members be able to read all the messages and send from it. You can have only the managers be able to do certain things. You can have people that you can't send to it unless you're a member. Like there's all these different controls. Google Groups are very powerful, and it's something that you should be exploring. If you're one of those people that says we're using it, but we want to know how to use better, Google Groups and learn about them. They are very powerful workspaces.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. Device management in Google Workspace.
Device management is just mentioned here because it's another thing that you can sort of add to your Google repertoire as a Google administrator. It is definitely next level and complicated, and not even really fully available at like this nonprofit tier, and even at the business tier. Some of the things that we're talking about would be more at like what's called the Business Plus, which I think is $6 per month with the nonprofit discount. So you're getting to be kind of pricey there. But like, for example, what you might do is say that you can't sync your Google Drive unless you're on a Windows. Well, you could also use Chromebooks and everything else, but Windows is the most common. You can do it with Macs as well or whatever, and iOS, iPads and phones. But let's just say you've got to be enrolled in our device management system in order to sync. You can access the stuff from anywhere, but if you want to sync it so that it's downloaded onto the computer, you need to be enrolled in our system, and that allows us as the administrators to make sure that you're compliant. Maybe we want our enrolled devices to be encrypted, so if the laptop gets lost, we don't have to report it as a data breach. That kind of a thing. So that's the light, quick version of what device management is. It's next level stuff that you can do. I don't think it's necessarily something that you need to worry about at the initial stage of rolling out Google Workspace, but it's something that you might want to keep in mind as something that you could do at the next level if you wanted to.
Excellent. And then quickly, we're going to have to rush through what is 2SV. I think you had said that's the equivalent of multi-factor authentication, but in the Google environment.
If you're going to set up nothing else, set up 2SV. You want to have multi-factor authentication. You want to have two-step verification in place because it's like leaving your door unlocked. If you're going to do nothing else, please set up two-factor authentication on your.
Exactly. And it's really easy in Google. Google has an authenticator that you can just very easily do. And then admin center reporting. This also seems like this might be a little bit more sophisticated.
Next level stuff. Yeah, but you can go into the admin center and you can get all sorts of reports on usage, on concerns about compliance or about, sloppy behaviors. But it's just like, it can be really great, sharing who's been sharing what. Google's careful about not about protecting the privacy of your users, but you can get a lot of information from the reports that are canned and available in the admin center.
And we will share a link to that as well, which has some more information to follow up on that. So Steve and Luke, if you're able to stay on, we did have a couple of questions come in. One particularly I wanted to touch on, which was, where does one find support for Google as a nonprofit? I know, of course, you can come to us. Community IT has a practice to be able to support Google Workspace, and we have our experts here with us today. But one person in the Q&A was saying that their current provider pretty much just refuses to help them administer Google Workspace. So, or if you're having trouble finding an MSP that can help you as you grow with Google Workspace, do you guys have any advice?
I would say that I feel their pain. I think that it's much less commonly supported by MSPs than the Microsoft stack is. And there are efficiency reasons that MSPs would want to stay in one lane or the other. I think community IT is not unique, but it's not common that they do what we do of being willing and able to support both, particularly, and that's very helpful for organizations that for whatever reason are needing to straddle, which does happen for sure. Luke, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I actually replied to this person directly in the written response, so I'm going to kind of follow up on that. But there is a way to get some help directly from Google through the admin portal. There is a support function, but that's really for things like large-scale account-wide issues. If you're having things like, you're having mass login difficulties, or there's a plugin that's not working, that kind of thing. For people who are trying to get just like direct kind of IT troubleshooting support with, I can't get this file to work, or there's an issue with our phone system, it's not routing properly, that kind of thing. You really do want to look for an IT provider that's willing to work in Google Workspace. And as Steve pointed out, a lot of people are not system agnostic. They like to do one thing, like to do that thing well, and that is a commendable behavior. But unfortunately, if it's something that you're going to leverage as a large part of your day-to-day, as a large part of your business platform, I would recommend looking for an IT provider who can match that need.
Yeah, so you can Google it, but yeah, it's for sure it's a smaller percentage of MSPs that can
yeah, just real quick. I mean, everything's supposedly real quick, but I will say that one of the advantages of being in the Google platform, if you're someone who's sort of trying to do this on your own without a lot of professional support, is that I do think that Google does a very good job of documenting their systems, and they also make that documentation, I would say, easier for the non-professional to grasp and follow. And of course, it is quite likely that you'll find those answers if you Google it. I mean, so I sometimes I will ask my question and then I will add in my Google search the word at the end, site, colon, and then I'll put google.com, which just restricts the links that Google surfaces to just Google site, Google answers. And that's often effective because Google answers on things usually are nice and simple and straightforward. Not always, but often.
And more trustworthy sometimes when you're
than third party for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going down a YouTube, YouTube examples can get. So we have another couple of questions that came in during the webinar. A couple of questions around Dropbox. So using Dropbox instead of Google Drive, or using Dropbox as an archive and using maybe Google for your more active, work that you're working on. So and some other people were asking about integrating, Google with other systems. So do you have advice on using Dropbox? Do you recommend it? Or is it
we used to recommend it when we felt like the Google Drive product was not very good. Our Gmail customers who were looking for a cloud document storage, we often directed them to Dropbox. And so we have clients that are in that boat who are using Google Workspace for Gmail, but are using Dropbox for files. I think it's a great combination. I don't know that I would change it. Dropbox is a good platform. It works well. It doesn't do the co-authoring as well as like Google Docs. If you're creating a doc or a sheet and you're trying to have multiple people editing at the same time. So that's a limitation. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't think you should feel like if you're using Google for some things, but you're using Dropbox for your file storage, that you're doing something wrong. I would not say that. Could you switch everything to Drive and save a little bit of money? Yeah. I'm not sure whether it would be worth it. If I were making that decision, I would be cautious about that. You probably have a lot of documents shared already to your external stakeholders through Dropbox. You've got your systems down, the workflows are working. So unless it's a pain point, I would probably keep paying what is probably not that much money because you get a discount as a nonprofit from Dropbox as well. And I don't think it's a good platform. So I would say, and it's not going to go anywhere. I don't think so. I would probably stay the course unless there was some specific pain point. If cost were your only driver, I wouldn't make that a decision maker.
That's another thing that we talked earlier about governance. So if you're using Dropbox for some tasks, just make sure that you have governance around that you have described, like when to use what, how they use it, and make sure new employees are trained on it, that sort of thing. Luke, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, totally fine. I would add a small caveat to what Stephen Callan said, which is the thing you want to be concerned about and kind of keep an eye on is data drift or data bloat. If you have people who are if you have Google Drive in place and that is what you're using for your file storage, I don't recommend also using Dropbox as file storage because then you have two people that are using two different systems. Your data is going to be different places, not going to be unified and cohesive. If you're using one, great. If you're using the other, great. They're both great platforms. But don't try and use both at the same time or use Dropbox as a backup because it's a communal working space. It's not designed for that.
Unless you have good governance, like we use Dropbox for everything except for this one program that where we're interacting with these stakeholders that all are using Google Drive, and then you've got clear, bright lines, everyone follows them, and that can work. But your point is well taken, Luke, for sure.
Yeah, I think as with everything we've been talking about today, like if you're intentional about it and you kind of understand it, can describe it, and have it in a governance document and do a training on it. Like that's another thing with people coming into your organization that we didn't really touch on today, but making sure that, not just people coming into your organization, but clearly people who have been working there for a while, making sure that everyone has training on how you expect them to use Google tools, Google Drive, shared drives, groups, all of that is very important to not just leave it up to chance, which I think, especially the way people get started with Google, it's so easy to use and get started that it can kind of lull you into this sense of that you don't need a lot of governance around it. But just like any organization, you need to know, people coming in need to know how you expect them to use the tool. We have another couple questions from registration, then I'll let everybody go. One was around security, which we haven't really touched on today, but several people in the registration questions had questions about can you use encryption with Google? Is it safe to store data? Is it safe to use forms? I would probably guess that, as with everything, you can use any tool in an insecure way. So do you guys have some suggestions on making sure you're being as secure as possible?
I think, again, good governance is key to that. But if you're concerned about data kind of going places where it shouldn't, you can really lock down those drives and be very specific about who can share, who they can share with. Sharing should have kind of timelines built into it where the links expire after a certain period of time. Oftentimes, I see people who will adopt, they'll have one Google Drive that is for sharing with external partners. So all their data lives in their existing file structure. They'll set up another one just for external sharing. It's managed by very few people who keep regular maintenance on, looking at who's accessing these files. Is that what's supposed to be happening? And again, with everything we've said, like if you're intentional about it, if you have good policies in place, you can do a lot of really great things. And don't be hesitant to reach out to someone, whether it's a consultant or your IT provider, whoever it may be, and say, this is our design use case. This is what we want to do with this. How can we be sure we're doing it safely?
I would just say, while you said that you can use any tool insecurely, which is absolutely true, I would say that if you use Google tools appropriately, they are secure. It is a platform that is used by multinational corporations. Luke mentioned the Indiana Health, the Indiana University health systems. These are big corporations. They have HIPAA rules. I mean, this is not. You should not think, that the platform is inherently insecure. It is not, and there's encryption at all levels and so forth and so on.
Yeah, that's a good way to answer it. Okay, our last question is one that had come in, and this is something I struggle with too, so I'm eager to hear your answer. So I have multiple Google email addresses and multiple logins because, of course, they're free to create. And so sometimes you'll be logged into one address and then it'll ask you to log into the other one. Hopefully it'll ask you. Sometimes someone will share a document with you. You go to open it, you're logged into a different address, so you can't open it. So do you guys have any suggestions on managing email bloat, I guess?
Well, I would encourage the person who asked that question to try to reduce the number of identities that they have. That is maybe not as easily done as I say it, but that would probably help. I think that Google provides a number of different ways to change your identity within a browser session, as well as within to have the browser itself browsers have ways to maintain different profiles. And I would probably encourage this person to look into that second direction of, let's say they're using Chrome, which is probably the browser that we would recommend you use if you're a Google Workspace user, because Chrome is designed by Google as well. So Chrome has what are called profiles. And so have actually a different profile for each of your different Google identities, and keep them, and then actually have different maybe have little pictures associated with each one. There's you have to do a little hack to make that work. Well, you can get different pictures for sure, but if you want the pictures to sort of match you and not a limited set of pictures that Google provides, there's a little hack that you can Google to find out how to do. But yeah, use different profiles, and then that way you're not switching your identities within a browser session as much. I think that might help. Luke, what do you think?
I would agree with that. My first thought was also browser profiles. If you're working, and this also applies to people who work in multiple 365 environments. If you're doing that, the Edge browser has a really great profile system built around that. Chrome and Firefox work really well with profiles for Google accounts. And I think it's by far the easiest way to kind of silo yourself. It's like, all right, I need to be Luke Casey, the individual person working on his personal stuff. I'm going to click here, and now I'm in that environment. Oh, I need to be Luke Casey for community IT. Let me click here. I'm back in that environment. It's a very easy switch, and it helps silo, one, your data, but also those parts of your life that you don't want to intersect too much.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you so much. I'm going to go. I love the idea too of making a visual cue. So when you have your little profile, you can see which one you're in. Well, I want to thank you so much to the people who have stayed on. I see that several of you have stayed with us. This is a great opportunity to get to ask Luke and Steve some more of our questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of the questions from registration, but do check back on our transcript. I want to quick hit back on the learning objectives, which I think we hit pretty well. We wanted to review the role of Google Workspace in the nonprofit sector, learn about some of the changes to Google over the last year, and I'm sure we'll be back with a reprise of this to continue to look at the changes as it continues to evolve. And then we spend a little time talking about common headaches with Google implementation, particularly as you grow and become more complex in your IT needs. So thank you both so much for that information. And thank you everyone for your questions today. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Luke and Steve, for giving us these great answers. And just get back to you the rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.